Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab podcast. I am your host, Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you for joining us because once again, we have Savannah with us. We're talking about legacy environmental injustice. Savannah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing A-okay, I think, today. And yourself?
I'm doing well. So the weather's better. The semester's getting close to an end. So all of us professors out there, we love our students, but it's nice when they're not around to kind of relax and think about other things. And so I'm excited about that coming up. What about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to graduation. Literally, my school sent me, you have 30 days to graduation just a few days ago. So they're counting down the days. I'm not. I have things to do in the meantime.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, we spent a lot of time on the podcast, I think all years up to this point, talking about legacy environmental injustice, and we have reached our conclusion, right? The series finale of legacy environmental justice. And so we've covered lots of ground. For those of you just tuning in for the first time, go back into the archives. There's lots of great episodes about the different things we've discussed regarding legacy environmental injustice, things like the economic impacts of what you might see within legacy environmental injustice. We focused on Kodak specifically as that facility, that industry that really had a mark on Rochester, New York, and what its impact was environmentally, economically, health-wise. We talked about gentrification, so many different things. And so I wonder for you, Savannah, if anything stood out to you. I know you're from Rochester, you've lived there, but I imagine with the research, with all the work you've done to kind of understand these impacts and this legacy environmental injustice that you've witnessed, I wonder if anything that we've talked about or what you've learned may have stood out to you during this whole time.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that has stood out to me is just how much this information is just not known and not out there. For example, my mom listens to our podcast. Shout out to Mom. Hi, Karen. Hi, Mom. And she talked to me like, wow, I was listening to you and I had no idea about all, the environmental injustice that Kodak perpetrated is still in a sense continuing to perpetrate. I had no idea about, the elementary school. I had no idea about the pipeline school. I had no idea about all these things. And she's lived there for over almost 30 years now, and she had no idea. And I think it just goes to show that despite you perhaps living in this community, you don't realize what is, being perpetrated in this community unless you start looking for it, because maybe not we, but maybe they have done a really good job trying to cover up their crimes of the past and their crimes of perpetuality that continue today. So I think that's one thing that's really stuck out to me. And just for me, my personal interest as well, I'm really interested in environmental pollution, particularly as the aspect of environmental justice, and not saying that the issues with healthcare and jobs and economic concerns and gentrification are not important, because they definitely are. It's just my passion, more lies in the natural resources side of things, the water resources side of things. So for me, I was just I want to say I loved learning about all the environmental harms, because you should be disgusted by that. But I found that piqued my interest the most, and I was like, whoa. Not that this is amazing, but I was just like, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening in my very own backyard. So I guess that would be what has stood out to me the most about this as well. And just the fact that we were able to record so many episodes on this as well, I just find that to be maybe not shocking, but surprising is how much there is to be said about this issue. And Kodak doesn't just pertain to the environmental stuff, but also it touches to every single facet of life, even if we don't really realize it. I know, for example, our last episode on gentrification, it wasn't very Kodak heavy, but we can still see how Kodak in the past, through its racial covenants, helped to lay the foundation for today's gentrification of the future. And it's all connected. I think that's a huge takeaway from what I've learned. And there's information out there. You have to read through some archives and some really old newspapers, but it's there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, Have you been talking to your mom about the content? Like, as we've been releasing it, have you had discussions? What's that been like to kind of engage your mom with these kinds of topics and to discuss these kinds of impacts, knowing that she lives there and could presumably be currently impacted by them?
I gotta be honest with you. Sometimes I'm like, Mom, you're listening to me. Oh, that's creepy. Um, but our conversations do pretty much amount to like she enjoys learning about it, and
Mhm,
I don't see my mom, taking action for these issues. To be quite honest with you, but like just the knowledge is, I think, the first step, because before you take action, you gotta take knowledge. And I think
mhm,
this is really helping her to do that. And I also just like this surprise as well. And she was talking to me about, she was like, "Oh, we know so and so. He died of brain cancer. I wonder if that's why, he got brain cancer. Or so and so, had stomach cancer." And I know that like their parent worked for Kodak. She can't like obviously be like, cause effect. But it's like, it made her think and realize like all these people that I've known who have, are suffering these terrible physical ailments. It's like, well, maybe this is why. And I
mhm.
don't think she ever would have, connected those dots if it wasn't for that podcast. And then also, like, while she's familiar with like all like the job loss and such, also seeing that like it continues as like more and more like industries start to, uh, essentially like phase out of Rochester as well, and seeing that if this is not like a new phenomenon, that this
Mm.
is continuing and going back into the past. And even like looking at history to see that as well. And I think that's what we've talked about, is that these connections with people that we personally know, because when you have a personal story, it makes it a lot more impactful than just being like this many people were affected this way. But when you like it's your friend, you care about your friend, and then it's even all about economic impacts as well. About, oh, that this is long going, and I don't think, unfortunately, that's going to it did not end with Kodak. It's not going to end with the current companies. It just keeps going, I believe.
No, no, that's a good point, and actually thinking about the history of Kodak and what happened throughout its history and up until the present day, how that impact has resulted in what people are experiencing in Rochester is a good lesson to learn when it comes to evaluating new industry or new operations that come into the city, because now you have at least some understanding of what could be taking place. If you now see, oh, well, we had Kodak here. This is what Kodak did. This is how it grew. This is how it impacted our society, our community. This is what happened when it went bankrupt and went under and when the things closed. If somebody else comes and just reopens that same facility, that same factory, and resumes similar operations, well, now we have an idea of what we could be re experiencing again, which is something that would be helpful to know, particularly for someone like your mom or anyone else listening who may not be aware of what happened the last time, didn't know the history. And now when they see what's coming, when they see things changing around them, when they see people getting sick, huh, I wonder if that's related to these operations because it appeared to be related to it in the past with Kodak. So that's pretty exciting. And so I'm just thrilled that this education, this understanding, these facts, this information is getting out and people are hearing it, learning, engaging it, thinking through now, hmm, I wonder if these things were connected, if these dots do go together, and kind of reimagining how they understand what's happening in their communities. So that's very exciting. I know for me personally, it was great to hear you, someone from Rochester, talk about a city with your personal understanding, your background, and your history. 'Cause I do a lot of reading and a lot of documentary watching. And so I don't get a chance to really talk to someone directly. So it's been great to hear you talk about it. And I was surprised at how thoroughly intertwined Kodak was with Rochester. You know what it reminded me of? I'm a big Marvel fan. I love Marvel movies. It reminded me of Venom. So I don't know if you know Venom. Venom is a symbiote. It's like this parasitic kind of being, and it inhabits a human, and it kind of takes over the person's body, gives them superhuman strength and power, and they fight, but it has its mind of its own and kind of controls what's going on around it. It made me think about that a little bit. I said, the person who has that venom on them feels strong and powerful and feels capable beyond what they could by themselves, but they also are subject to the whims and the attitude and the approach of that being. And so I wonder if Kodak had that same kind of influence where we appreciate the jobs. You even said it, great jobs, great benefits, investment into the community. Um, the university itself got lots of funding from there. I'm sure people, politicians, other local businesses benefited from their presence there, but the impact, the pollution, the damage, I mean, it was extensive and very destructive. And so I took that away and I said, buyer beware and be, fully engaged with what could be coming if you find yourself in a city, in a place where these kinds of facilities and industries are located and operating, particularly at full capacity. So I took that from there, from our discussion. And so for anybody listening, go back and listen to all of them. They're great conversations, great information, just a great discussion about Kodak and Rochester and all those impacts that come along with it. And so as we look forward now, thinking about legacy environmental justice, what are some of the things that you think we need to take away from all these discussions, from all this conversation with regards to it?
I think one thing to take away to begin with is that obviously every single town, city, village looks a little different when it comes to legacy environmental injustice. Some towns might have a more concern with, for example, is there like appropriate infrastructure investment? Are the bridges being maintained?
Hmm.
Others it might be more like, can we get like clean drinking water? Still others it might be, are, family structures in the sense that like people have, safe places that they can turn to, whether they not be relatives, biological or not. Is that being maintained as well? Is poverty more of a concern in some of these areas? Every single
Hmm.
place is different, ultimately. And while we can look at Rochester and point out like these different topics like we've done in the past, your hometown, your city may not have the same mode to fit into. This isn't exactly like a mode that like your legacy environmental injustice where you live needs to fit into, but rather it's more of a structured blob, if you will, and that
Hmm.
blob can be adapted to fit numerous other categories that legacy environmental injustice would be impacting and causing to create. I would also say that legacy environmental injustice, is still injustice, but I would argue that it is a step in the right direction. I don't want our listeners to be like, oh, if, we get rid of this, this terrible polluting industry, this terrible polluting plant, that everything's going to be worse. Now, I don't know your exact situation, but I would like to hope that, like, they're not actively polluting as much, but there are still, those those crimes of the past that need to be,
Hmm.
fixed and remedied, and brought to light. So I wouldn't be like, no, don't stop the plant. The plant must keep emitting. No, no, get rid of the plant. But understanding that you're just opening perhaps a new chapter in that book that is
Hmm.
environmental injustice and environmental racism as a whole. It's just, part two, if you will, or part three, depending on the community. And then I'd also say there's many ways to combat legacy environmental injustice. Perhaps you're more ingrained in your community. You have all these partnerships, these resources, people. That's great. Use that to your advantage to let your city council know, your representative know about what is important to you. I know there's a sense that's like, oh, my representative doesn't want to hear what I have to say. They're supposed to. They're paid to do
Hmm.
that. Now, some of them grant you more listening than others, but you have, or like have a protest, raise awareness, have like an hour of action call, a day of action. have Zoom calls about this. If nobody knows your passion, nobody's gonna probably be reaching out to you to be like, hey, do you want to talk about this? Like, for example, you never would have reached out to me and be like, Savannah, a person who I've never ever met before, who attends school in a totally different state. Do you want to do a series on your hometown about this issue? No, I had to bring it up. I had to prepare the content and such.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, there's also the sense of another avenue to pursue legacy environmental injustice is going back to for example, my mom in that case. People may not know about it that much. You might know some basics. You might know, oh, we lost a lot of jobs. Oh, yeah, we have an idea that they polluted because they were making stuff that we know pollutes. But you tend to realize how bad it was, how perversive it was, how
Mm-hmm.
extreme it was until you start actually looking into things. I guess that is what I would say. In the town, often look into it. I'm just probably there's some skeleton in your closet, Granny. Unless your town was founded last year, and even still, that land belonged to somebody before your town was founded, and there's probably something in there that nobody wants to be brought to light, um,
Mm-hmm.
living or otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I mean, I would also say part of why we even did this series was because we wanted people to understand, and even I know more clearly now that the closure and the shuttering of a facility doesn't automatically mean that the harm or the damage won't continue or you won't experience anything once that's been done. And so it is important to recognize that, hey, we've done a heavy lift to either get this plant to relocate or to cease operations or to reduce their emissions or to reduce their pollution. But there is still work to be done to make sure that you're still protected from any potential contamination that you were experiencing or that you are currently going to experience that's sitting either in the water supply, in the soil, in the air that hasn't been resolved, although the operations themselves may have ceased. And so it is important to continue to have that conversation and recognize that so you're not left believing wrongly that everything is fine now. They're gone, it's shut down. I don't see the building there anymore. Everything is great. Finally, we're done, and then you move on. There is some residual, there is a legacy, there is environmental injustice that still takes place, right? The idea of being compensated for your, harm, the idea of getting health care that takes care of you from what you've experienced while they were operating. That needs to be a conversation, right? The idea that, you're trying to reestablish your communities that may have been impacted by these facilities. That has to be a conversation because somebody has to pay for it. Somebody has to help you rebuild what you've lost. Someone has to invest in where you are to ensure that you have a community that's safe and healthy. All that needs to happen even after the facility has gone. And so, I mean, Savannah, you're absolutely right. I mean, these are the things we have to talk about and really think through. And every community is different. Every community has its own set of concerns, its own way of addressing issues. We need to get engaged and understand that. And at the very least, bring awareness to people around us because just like Savannah's mom or my parents or anyone else, they wouldn't just know these things, right? You sent me an email. I read through it and I said, this is something I didn't know about. Let's have the conversation. And that one conversation turned into 7, but I'm glad we had it. And so these are all amazing, great things that we need to really be aware of and continue to push for because I do believe that there is a path towards a cleaner, healthier, safer community for everyone, regardless of the history of your town or city or even state. So thank you for sharing all those things. Um, you know how we always do this. Give me something else, anything else that's on your mind, on your heart, that you just came to your head a second ago while I was talking, because we all want to hear what you think, how you feel, and what we should do. about all this?
I guess how I think and feel is that yes, we've made a lot of, headway in, this past 7 episodes of this podcast series, as you mentioned, but there's still a lot more headway to be made. Like, there are programs to be started. There's still pollution to clean up. There's more
Mm-hmm.
awareness to be raised. There's communities to be, empowered and to be listened to. And the fight, to get rid of Kodak is still continuing, like you mentioned. And I don't think that should dishearten us in a sense that I feel like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be like, we had such a big victory and now it's like, now we have another victory. It is heartening in a sense that progress is being made towards, a more just sustainable earth. But let us, not be disheartened by the fact that there is still all these issues. And even still, even if our town, by some awesome chance, happens to be, rid of all the pollution, you know, jobs are invested in, healthcare is invested in, people who are impacted receive the care that they need for free, or for like at least a very, very, very reduced price. There's still other towns that this needs to occur in as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other towns that, I mentioned earlier, like part 2 or part 3 could be environmental injustice, legacy environmental injustice. Well, some towns are still on part 1, and we need to help
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that those towns can get to the next part in their chapter, away from those polluting industries and facilities, and essentially like warmongering, abusive industries that don't really care about the people; they care about their profits.
Mm-hmm.
And the sense that this is a battle for all of us. And I guess I would say, like I've always said, I don't want to feel like I'm being redundant, but alas, I'm going to be. Learn more about injustice in your hometown, if possible. Make a friend with your local librarian if you have one. I'm sure they would love to help you conduct some research. Not everything has been digitized nowadays, but a lot of good things are in the archives waiting to be discovered. Similarly, I'm sure they'll teach you how to do, online research. Also, talk with other people as well. You would not know a lot of the personal stories without being like, oh, let me go connect with my neighbor, that person who I work with at the same job as me. Oh, that person at the supermarket. Get to meet people. Part of the reason that any kind of environmental justice is so damaging is because it's not just hurting the earth, it's also hurting people. So we need
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we're investing in people and that we're getting to hear what people say. And yes, a newspaper can tell us what somebody's saying, but we also want to hear about what is, someone who's actually in our life saying as well. Because chances are the person who wrote the newspaper is, it was either many, many years ago, maybe they moved out of a town, but there is somebody right in front of you who you should be caring about. We should all be, be caring for our communities, and that involves the people in them. And I would encourage you also to share what you know with others. I think there's a sense that's like, I don't want to speak against this industry because you never know who's listening, or it's not going to make a big difference. Don't let it be like, they always say like the 2 taboo topics are like politics and religion. Don't let it be like that. Talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Find a way to say it to somebody that it won't like ruffle your feathers or send me a complete shock. But if you like introduce things, being like, I really care about clean water. Because they also care about clean water. We all care about clean water to an extent. And then being like, but I learned this is impacting our water. And then bringing it into the conversation that way. There's back doors you can take to those hard conversations where people, you know, perhaps who do not want to hear about the fact that there is injustice pertaining to racism
Mm-hmm.
and sexism and, where you're from, all these things. But if you can get in another side door, you can essentially, and I would say, help to expand their universe about what is going on in the community and not only why it impacts their neighbors, but how it also impacts them
Mm-hmm.
without them being all like, oh, you're liberal, away from me. But we need dialogue, and dialogue is really, really important. Constructive dialogue that is also informed.
Yes, yes. I like that dialogue that is informed, that has true facts and information that we can use to make things better. And I love the point you made that it's affecting all of us, because we do spend a lot of time kind of highlighting the disparities and disproportionate impacts, but and it's true and that happens, but the idea isn't that, oh, I'm only helping those individuals who are disproportionately impacted. You're helping everyone. We all benefit from each of us living in a healthier, safer, cleaner community. We all benefit from reducing pollution. We all benefit from reducing contamination and exposure to contamination and those kinds of things. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. If you're having these conversations, this dialogue, as Savannah said, if you're informing yourself, if you're learning about these issues, just know that that work will help everyone all around you, everyone in your community, everyone in your city or town, not just the one side of town that's experiencing the disproportionate impacts, or not just one community, not just one group of people, not just one zip code. It's all of us who benefit from that understanding and from that knowledge, from that dialogue, and ultimately from that action. And so we are both encouraging all of you listening to do that, to take those actions, to learn about your community, learn about what's been going on from the environmental side, the economic side, the health sides. Talk to your neighbors and friends. Talk to your local people, right? Your librarians, your law enforcement officers, teachers, people who've been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They know and they've seen and experienced so much that can help you gain a better understanding of what's been happening in that community. And so that's what we want you to leave with. Legacy environmental injustice is a real, tangible concern, and keep fighting, keep pushing, keep learning, and keep making a difference. Anything else, Savannah? That's what you told me to do.
Yeah, no, I think you have encapsulated it perfectly.
All right. Well, if that's the case, then Savannah, thank you so much. I cannot tell you how great it's been to have you on the podcast for as long as we've had you. This is our last episode on this topic. You're getting ready for graduation. We know you're going to do great things, be very impactful wherever you land. We know it's going to be great. I'm not even going to say good luck, because you don't need luck. You're clearly highly intelligent, motivated, smart, hardworking. We talked about that already off air. Very hardworking. I'm telling you, she works very hard, people. Very, very hard. And so thank you so much for being on the podcast. And you have a home here anytime, whenever you like. So if you have another topic you want to discuss, if you have some ideas that you feel like you're not hearing enough about, hey, we can bring it here and we can discuss it and learn together. So thank you so much for being on the podcast with me.
And thank you for having me and, responding to my initial email. Without that response, none of this would have been possible. And thank you for, putting up with me sometimes in my mad ramblings in my schedule. And I really appreciate it. And I hope all your listeners too know how awesome that you are, and how, what wise you are, and how cool you are too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And with that, this has been another episode of the Environmental Justice Lab, where we are for the people and for the planet. We'll see you next time.